Monday. I'm trying to remember what day today is. It's March 6th. It's Monday. It is the Transportation and Environment Committee. We got a number of items on the agenda today, and first we're going to take up amendments to the Comprehensive Water Supply and Sewer Systems Plan. Mr. Levchenko, I'll turn it over to you to walk us through.
We have staff from DEP here that can speak to the executive's recommendations on each of the requests. We also have Mr. Zients sitting back there who, and I believe we'll have a staff person from the planning department here that can speak to any questions regarding their recommendations, which were identical to the executive, actually. This is actually the second package of amendments from last year. Normally the DEP works processes these requests and gets them through the executive recommendation process, and they get transmitted to the council, typically in a schedule of twice a year, usually in the spring and then in the fall or late fall. This one was a little bit later, so it's crept into this fiscal or this year. And then there are also administratively dealt with requests that they do on their side of the street. We are informed of them, and we can ask questions and actually pull them to be seen by the council. But if we don't do that, those go through the administrative process across the street about 4 times a year. So for better or worse, you tend to see the more problematic requests, not the easy ones to approve. So sort of say that up front. And this package actually has 7 category change amendments in it. I have some slides here that basically repeat what's in the packet. So if you have the packet in front of you, you can refer to that. But I also have, just for ease of getting through it, I've got some slides here. This slide, this map shows the 7 amendment requests. Actually, 6 of them are grouped in the Glen Hills area up here. They're all in the Potomac Subregion Master Plan area. This is the city of Rockville up here. And then there's one request down here, which we'll talk about as well. It's in the Potomac Subregion Planning area, but it's not in the Glen Hills area. So just some quick timeline and background on this. The executive transmitted his recommendations at the end of December. I mentioned that they're all in the Potomac Subregion Master Plan area. They all also involve a policy that's unique to the Potomac Master Plan, which is the Potomac Peripheral Sewer Service Policy. So we'll talk more about that as we go through this packet. The Planning Board had its discussion. It's formally part of this process. We notify them when the council receives its requests. They schedule a hearing to receive testimony and make recommendations. They did that on February 23rd. As I mentioned, they concurred with the county executive's recommendations in each case, and we'll go through those. And then the council held a public hearing on February 28th, and you received both oral testimony and written testimony. A number of the applicants submitted testimony. We also heard testimony from the West Montgomery County Citizens Association, as well as some residents who live near some of these requests. And that testimony is linked in the packet if you want to refer to it later. Real quickly on the category change process, since this is new to this current committee, I mentioned that DEP is responsible for processing the requests. They also work with departments and agencies such as DPS, Planning Department, WSSC Water, to identify any issues and feasibility and so forth. So they coordinate that process. And then they work through the county executive to transmit formal recommendations to the council. The council action is the next step in that process, and the council can do a number of things. It could do a straight approval of a request. It can do a conditional approval that requires some other action to happen first, and then DEP can then change the category change formally after that happens. Or they can defer a request if further information is needed or something else needs to happen first and the council wants to return to the council for that. Or they can just do a denial. Anything that is approved is considered an amendment to the 10-year plan and does have to go to the Maryland Department of the Environment for final action. So just as the 10-year plan, which the council approved last fall, Evan was here for that, that's currently at MDE. But any amendments would also include category change requests that are approved. Denials do not have to go since they are not amendments to the plan. The state does not question denials, they only review approvals. And just a little bit more information on the water and sewer plan itself. This is, the plan itself is the policy document that's intended to implement master plan recommendations, as well as identify areas that are not covered in master plans that need a bit more detail. The plan is required by the state to be comprehensively reviewed every 3 years. I mentioned we've sent over our most recent plan comprehensive update last November. So it's currently under review. But the key point to remember is the specific water and sewer plan policies are what drive a lot of the discussion of these category change requests. What we look at with the request is what policies would apply to them or could apply to them. And if so, does it inform us as to whether the request should be approved or denied, or something else has to happen? I do want to speak in particular to the Glen Hills area. I mentioned that 6 of the requests are in that area. The 2002 Potomac Subregion Master Plan put in some very significant restrictions in that area, pending completion of a study. So basically, prior to the completion of the study, which I'll get to in a moment, unless you had a documented failed septic system, you were basically restricted from being approved for service. So much stricter than other areas outside the planned envelope. That's the other thing I should mention, that the Glen Hills area is outside the planned sewer envelope. Generally, all the requests you deal with are. If they're within the envelope, they can generally be approved administratively by DEP in most cases. The study I mentioned was initiated and completed by DEP about 8 to 10 years ago. That looked at septic suitability in the area and if and how you could extend sewer to certain parts of Glen Hills. And then that study came over in the form of a amendment from the executive that the council considered. And as part of that process, the council did remove a couple of the restrictions that were unique to Glen Hills. So the abutting mains policy, which you may have heard of elsewhere, which allows properties to connect which have a main in front of them, in which their property predates the main, they can connect in most cases throughout the county if they're outside the planned envelope, and certainly if they're inside. That was not true in Glen Hills, but it was made effective in Glen Hills as part of this amendment that was approved by the council. Similarly, it also allowed for the study of sewer or septic issues within an area, broader than just one property. That's something that was also available outside the planned envelope, but not available in Glen Hills. So that resolution incorporated those two elements. And then there happened to be a 2018 comprehensive update. And that comprehensive update allowed for the peripheral sewer service policy, which previous to that was not applicable in Glen Hills, to be applicable in Glen Hills. And that brings us to some of the issues today. I also did want to mention that the 2018 plan update also did add a restriction countywide regarding on-site systems surveys, when we look at areas of service. And the 2018 plan update actually made that stricter. The council opted to require that at least one septic system failure be documented in an area before it could be studied. And the reason that's particularly important in this context is several of the requests that have come before us in this package were part of a study in Glen Hills that was initiated before that restriction went in place, But when that restriction went in place, they no longer qualified to go forward as a study. So now they're coming forth individually as requests. Yeah, just as I mentioned here. And then the 2022 plan update, which I referred to earlier, did not make any changes affecting the Glen Hills area. So the let's see, this is the first. This shows the 6 requests in the Glen Hills area. Let's see, a little hard to see them here. 3 of them actually are being discussed together, but then there's 3 other ones. There's this one here, and this one. So they're all Glen Hill. Mr. Sukup. The study area here is hard to see on this map. I believe these 3 properties were part of the study area that are circled.
Yes, those 3 properties are part of the study area, as is 22 TRV04A on Foxton Drive. The study area is outlined in orange.
Right, okay. Yeah, it's a little hard to see on this map. And then you had this other property nearby that's part of this request, and this property as well. So I've mentioned the peripheral sewer policy a couple of times. Just to summarize it, and then we have executive staff here too that can speak to the executive's rationale in the different requests. But it is a policy that does allow for consideration of service on a case-by-case basis for properties that are outside the planned envelope and otherwise ineligible. There are certain areas that are excluded from this, and they're mentioned here, the Piney Branch Subwatershed, the Palatine and Potomac neighborhood, and the Greenbrier Estates neighborhoods. And then just to get into a little bit more detail of what it involves. The policy language notes that extensions should follow existing public rights-of-way, not affect streams, stream valley buffers, or other environmentally sensitive areas. So that's a key point that we don't want. We don't want to create an environmental problem for an exceptional policy in this case. And then also, the idea is to minimize the number of properties that would abut the new sewer main that otherwise are also ineligible for service. So those are sort of the key elements of it. And then in the 2022 plan update, we added language to affirm the current practice that the policy is intended to address areas that are adjacent or abutting our sewer service area, not the city of Rockville's sewer service area. And there's, as I mentioned, there's a few properties that fall into that category in this request. So in terms of the individual requests, I'm going to just sort of walk through them in the order that they're in the packet. The first request, 22 TRV01A, the Sikh Heritage Trust. Now, the title might suggest that it's a private institutional facility, but in this case, we're not dealing with the private institutional facilities policy. We're dealing with as a individual request for a residential development. I've listed some of the key facts in this. It's close to about a 5-acre RE2 zone property. And I do have a map that I'll show in a second. Located north of Glen Road, about 1,150 feet west of Piney Meeting House Road in Potomac. One of the parcels does have a single-family home. The second parcel is undeveloped. So as I mentioned earlier, if the single-family home had a documented failure, that might be an opportunity for that property to connect and get a single connection. It couldn't serve a subdivision, but it could serve that single-family home. Second parcel, however, is undeveloped, and the only policy that might apply in this case would be the peripheral sewer service policy. The applicant is seeking public sewer to serve both parcels for a residential subdivision. WSSC Water identified 2 alternatives for serving the site, and I've got them shown here. I'm not going to read all this, but this is the map of the site, and one of the challenges is it's a landlocked site. So you either have to come from the east through this sort of landlocked area, or you have to come from the southwest. Wait, I'm sorry, what's that? I'm sorry, north. This connection here, sorry. To come down here from the northwest. So as we talked about earlier, about some of the issues with the peripheral sewer policy, both sites involve some potential environmental impact. Both require easements, so they're not following the public right-of-way. We did hear testimony from a number of folks in the area that were concerned about the environmental impacts of serving this property under either of these approaches. It is adjacent to the planned public sewer envelope, although it is in the Greenbrier Branch area, which is excluded in the master plan policy. The executive also notes here, and this is where you get into more case-by-case review of the intent of the policy, which is to fill in areas and not open up new areas for significant amounts of development. So that's an issue here too. The other thing that the executive staff report mentions is that it is adjacent to the RNC zoned properties, and the intent of the peripheral sewer policy was to deal with RE1 and RE2 zoned properties and adjacency to the sewer envelope with those properties. So I've mentioned about the public right-of-way issues. For those issues, the executive has recommended denial, as has the planning board, and council staff concurs. We do have executive staff here who can provide more elaboration if you'd like regarding this request, but staff's comfortable with the executive and the planning board's recommendations.
Thank you for that, Mr. Levchenko. Thank you both for being here. So colleagues, we're taking the deep dive into sewer policy. This is the first time this is being brought up at this T&E committee, and important stuff, technical in detail, and so I appreciate DEP staff here. For me, I will say that as I go through these, as we go through these, seeing the recommendations of our professional staff, both in the executive offices, at the planning board as well, helps guide me. And for this particular item, everyone who has reviewed it in government has denied the request, and I would support that recommendation.
Me too.
Okay.
Next request. 22 TRV 04A, Mazel. This is about a 2-acre RE2 zone property located on Foxden Drive, north of the intersection with Overley Drive in the Glen Hills area. The applicant seeking public sewer to serve an existing single-family home. WCC Water has noted it would require an 850-foot extension along Foxden Drive and Overley Drive to serve the property, and it would abut 4 other properties which are not currently eligible for service. Here's a map of that property. This is the sewer envelope here. So the property does come to a point, so technically does abut or is adjacent to the sewer envelope. But it does require a substantial extension to serve it. It is in the public right-of-way, which is consistent with the policy, but it's a very long line. And also it would open up other properties that are not adjacent to the sewer envelope for service. And executive staff also have noted that it's adjacent to an area, but it would not be served in a logical manner from that area. It would be coming from not the same neighborhood. So they also expressed concern in the context of the policy with regard to that. So for all those reasons, the executive recommends denial, as does the planning board, and council staff concurs. Are there any questions regarding this request?
Concur with all those recommendations? Okay.
The next request, 22 TRV 13A Eisenhower, a 2.76 acre RE1 zone property located on Foxden Court. So it's a around the corner from the other property we just talked about in the Glen Hills area. And I'll show the map here. The other property was right here that we just talked about. This one is over here. So this one is adjacent to that same neighborhood we talked about. And let's see, I believe, I was looking for, oh yeah, in terms of how it could be served. There's two ways it could be served that were noted in the executive staff report. WCC Water had noted the property could be served by a non-abutting connection from Jasmine Hill Terrace. That's the existing sewer service area, but it would require easements. We're not going through the public right-of-way. DP has noted that an alternative would be to extend sewer, but it would be an extremely long extension that would also serve the other property we just talked about, but have to go much further from an existing main on Overley Drive and go via Foxden Drive. And once again, you have a number of other properties that would be abutted and then eligible, which are not currently eligible for service. So once again, for similar reasons to denying this one, DEP, so the Executive and Planning Department, I'd recommend denial of this request, as does council staff.
Concur?
Yep. All right, the next one actually is 3 requests. I mentioned this earlier. These were 3 requests that are adjacent to the Rockville sewer service area. So you can see City of Rockville listed here. These are the 3 requests. And so we have an immediate issue with regard to the adjacency, not being adjacent to our envelope, being adjacent to the City of Rockville. And then on top of that, in order to serve the properties, you would have to go through environmentally sensitive areas. Or if you try to minimize that environmental impact, then you have a fairly long sewer extension to get into the court. So the executive staff report notes the ineligibility because of the adjacency issue of the Rockville service area. I noted earlier that we clarified in the plan in the 2022 update that properties had to be adjacent to the county sewer envelope, not the Rockville sewer envelope. I just noted, in addition, that we have some other concerns with this site, not just those 3 properties, not just that, but for all those reasons, the Executive and Planning Department staff recommended denial, as does council staff.
On the map to the right, the Rockville Sewer Service Area to the north in 920108, is that the City of Rockville? Or is it
Where are you?
the ones in the yellow up there, the ones that are in the Rockville? Yes, those are in the county, but it's
Mr. Sukup answer that when he's. Ms. Balcom had a question about where the Rockville city boundary is.
Yes, the Rockville city boundary, where these 3 requests are adjacent to the city ones, right along that split between the Rockville service area and the WSCC service.
That's the city.
right. So the ones in the yellow above there, that is Rockville. Okay.
Right? And sometimes the service area is not the same as the municipal boundary.
Right.
They're not quite the same.
Okay.
The city has a maximum expansion limit that includes all the properties that are shown in yellow here. So because they're outside the Washington suburban sanitary district, the intent is to serve those properties by incorporation into the city, not by WSCC.
Okay, thank you.
So if I could just drill down on that a little bit more. So those properties could get hooked up if the City of Rockville expanded.
Yeah, the properties in yellow,
Yeah.
the idea is for them to annex into the city, and the city would figure out how to serve them. And we'll see a case like that coming up in just a little bit, but
Now, these are not in the maximum
right.
annexation area. over here, but they also don't meet our criteria.
Understood, but I know this is frustrating for a lot of people, right? Which is why these cases come before us. And in an effort to try and guide people in the right direction or towards a remedy, I think this information that they should work with the city of Rockville and speak to those managers and elected officials about getting hooked up through, is that not correct?
These three cases
Yeah.
are within the Washington Suburban Sanitary District. And so at the moment, they are not intended to annex into the city, although the city has made some changes to their maximum expansion limit. But they are still within what we call the WSSD service area. And so they are intended to be, if they're going to be served, they're intended to be served by WSSC water, not the city.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yep.
So you're asking us for this recommendation, and this is on all three properties?
I'm sorry, this was, these three, let me make sure we have the, actually, and it gets a little, they're recommended for deferral, not denial. Staff is okay with that, although I think staff was also okay with denial. They're recommended for deferral because MDE is currently reviewing the 2022 comprehensive update that includes the language regarding the affirmation that you need to be adjacent to the county sewer envelope, not the city of Rockville. I don't think there's that MDE is going to insert itself into that issue, but we can wait for that to happen. The executive's recommendation is to wait, and if MDE were to affirm that, then they would be denied.
I'm comfortable with the deferral, so that if through those,
Yeah, so just as the chair mentioned people's frustration with this, and I think I'm comfortable with the deferral, but I wanted to clarify something from the public hearing. Some folks mentioned that they had put in this request before the 2022 plan had been changed, and they were feeling like, I think in their words, things kind of changed. And I was just curious, I don't necessarily disagree with the direction we're going in, but again, trying to understand the people's frustration with the process.
Yeah, the on-site sewer study that we mentioned earlier initially began to move forward for the North Potomac Highlands area. However, at that time, it didn't require a failure to be documented. People could identify constraints or concerns about replacement systems, site conditions, things like that, to see if it, and then a study could move forward to, and then the executive would make a recommendation, the council could act. But in 2018, the council explicitly said, in fact, you have to have a confirmed documented failure before one of these studies could move forward. And the council also said that's for any study going forward, even if the study's already been initiated. So the council had an opportunity to grandfather that in and chose not to.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification. I'm good with the deferral.
Great.
And, okay, Shevitz request. It's 3.5 roughly acre RE1 zone property on Scott Drive, also in the Glen Hills area. And I'll show you on the map that this also does require a pretty substantial extension to serve the property. However, this one, let's see, trying to bring it in. Scott Drive. Mr. Sukup, which one should I be pointing to here? I can't read it.
The orange line is the required extension from WSSC.
Which property?
Oh, it's up in the northwest corner.
This one,
there.
right, okay. Yeah, you just couldn't read it. So this property is actually in what Mr. Sukup mentioned earlier, is the planned service area for Rockville water and sewer, not in the WSSD. So the executive recommendation is that the applicant work with the city on a possible annexation agreement and then move forward with connection through the city, and to defer the request pending the outcome of that process.
Let me just ask a question about this map. So those properties that are along the route of that proposed pipe that are in a greenish hue, is that green, yellow, right?
Yellow, yeah.
Yellow, okay. So those are all septic, or those are just because I can't see the key?
Those are all septic.
And so for that property all the way, 2, 4, 6, into that road across from Frost Middle School, have the others tried to get hooked up, or just trying to understand the potential logic?
There's several properties up to the northwest that have annexed into the city and have received public sewer service. Along here, I think we had 1 or 2 properties that requested inclusion in the North Potomac Highlands survey, the one that was interrupted or stopped. We excluded those properties from the survey, again, because they are within the area that's intended to be served by the city of Rockville, not the WSSD. This was not one of those, as I recall. But they are, there are a few properties on the north side that have been approved for service because they're within the city or within the city service area, but have not yet received public sewer, at least as far as we know.
Right, because trying to figure out how to accommodate that one property that is leapfrogging over others and what
Right.
holistically can be done.
Right, and the city's sewer mains are shown in yellow here. The WSSCs are in red. And there are sewer mains that we couldn't squeeze onto the map up to the northwest that might provide service here from the city's system. The city gets revenue from the properties that are within its service area. Obviously, they want to keep as many of those properties in their service area as possible, which is why we don't infringe upon their service area.
There are pros and cons with annexation, although I don't
Right.
see any con with being in the city of Rockville. It's a great city.
And ultimately, the orange sewer main may be the way that the city decides to serve all these properties that are in their service area, but we're not at that point yet.
And so the recommendation is
It's a
deferral.
deferral
Yeah,
pending
deferral.
the outcome of that.
I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah,
Great, we're all in agreement.
And I would add that deferrals are intended to last no more than a year or 2. So we would be bringing these back to the council, hopefully fairly soon. I know that thrills you.
So those are the 7 requests. Since the committee's concluded its business, we will schedule it before the full council for work session and action. Probably not tomorrow, but perhaps as soon as next week.
Sure, very good.
Could I just
Yeah,
say,
go ahead.
Given that this is our first time as this committee going in deep on the sewer stuff, I just want to say thank you to the staff for a very complete package. Once reviewing it, I think it was very helpful, so I just wanted to say thank you to the staff.
Thank you.
It can be complicated, and as noted, it's personal for many, and so we try to accommodate and do what we can, and that's part of what the deferral process is. Well, we had some good conversation a few months back with the previous council, and so we worked through these, but thank you both. Thank you, Chair Lyons.
Next up, you have a discussion of green bank legislation.
We do. Great.
Colleague,
Thank you, Mr. Levchenko.
I'll be back for the 3rd item.
Okay, very good. Good morning, everybody. Hi, good to see you. Ms. Oconee, good to see you. So this is an exciting piece of legislation that the county executive has sent over with some, after the result of lots of good conversations, but quite frankly, after the result of lots of good work by the Green Bank, recognizing that the Montgomery County Green Bank is not only a model in the region, but it has become a national model as well. We have Senator Van Hollen talks about it frequently in terms of endearment, and he's doing work at the federal level to help model it. But because of the track record of success, we all think it's primed to do more and to be able to receive some of the funds that the federal government is providing. And so that requires some change in the law to expand the scope. And we'll talk about expanding other aspects of the body as well throughout this conversation. But it is a natural evolution of the good work that you have all done. And thank you. Colleagues have any comments?
No.
Ms. Oconee, we'll turn it over to you.
Good morning, Chair Glass, and good morning to the committee. Yes, this is Bill 323. It is an executive bill, so it's sponsored by the Council President on behalf of the county executive. What I'll do is I'll just walk through some of the salient aspects of the proposed bill, and then at the end I'll get to some proposed amendments to the bill. And I also have a special consideration for the committee's review. So the packet, which has the staff memo, gives some background on why we're here. This was triggered by the State Assembly enacting legislation that authorized municipalities to enact resiliency authorities. The county executive's position is that because Montgomery County has a green bank, and keeping in mind that the green bank was set up with the primary goal of leveraging financing, public and private financing, to support investing in clean energy. Whereas when you're talking about resiliency, you're dealing with infrastructure that addresses the impacts of climate change. So as originally set up, the Green Bank's primary focus was simply, not simply, very complicated, but it had a pretty defined purpose of leveraging finances for investing in clean energy. So once the State Assembly enacted this enabling legislation to provide for resilience authorities, the executive's position is that we already have a green bank. Why don't we just expand the scope of what the green bank is authorized to do? The one caveat I do want to mention is this is an expansion of the enabling legislation. So it doesn't obligate or commit them to doing anything in particular, but it expands their authority should they choose to do so. The memo contains some background information on exactly how the Green Bank operates and the Council's role relative to the Green Bank. Certainly, if there are any questions, we have both the CEO and Chief Investment Officer from the Green Bank are present, and we also have from DEP, we have Mr. Stan Edwards, the Energy, Climate and Compliance Division, to address any questions that you may have regarding the operations. We do have impact statements that are included in the packet, and those are addressed. I will get to some of the proposed amendments regarding this bill. So the first proposed amendment actually comes from Council President Glass, who, as currently worded, the law, the Green Bank bill provides for the Green Bank having not more than 11 board members, and Council President Glass is proposing to expand that to not more than 15. And if you'd like to address
Sure.
that.
So thank you for that background. I'll use this as an opportunity to invite Mr. Deo, Mr. Edwards, if you want, to brief us, right, about why this legislation at this point is important to you all. But clearly, with regard to that amendment, after speaking with Mr. Deo and Mr. Morell, recognizing that over the last number of years, the board has been an incredibly hardworking board. And as they pivot to more of an advisory board, having a wealth of even more opinions and relationships would be helpful. And boards or organizations of their size and the size that they aspire to be and that we need them to be typically have more than 11 board members as well. So it's standard practice within the nonprofit sector. But Mr. Deo, I'll turn it over to you to share your thoughts about where we are and about this legislation and also the amendment.
Great. Thank you, Council President Glass. Councilmember Stewart, Councilmember Balcom. We are proud to be a part of this county, and I think it's an honor to have served and to bring as much as we could to the county in elevating clean energy as a green bank. I do appreciate you seeing us as a national model. I think what we've put on the table and what we've done have proven to be models that others have taken, and our most recent work that our Steve Morrell did and bringing 2 other CDFIs into a very large solar project demonstrated how other partners are interested in being a part of what we're doing here in the county. So I think we've proven our ability to understand the marketplace, make connections, make partners, that we were able to make deep inroads in the clean energy environment. The climate action plan that the county adopted put a lot on the table, put the Green Bank in a lot of those spaces on that climate action plan, particularly in this area of climate resiliency, climate adaptive change. And we felt that what our learnings were, the ability for us to bring other private capital, the work that Steve Morrell does in order to make partnerships, leverage that capital in the county, could benefit the county as well in the area of resiliency. Also, there are other resources out there that right now we feel we could go after if our charter was broadened in order to include resiliency. So we think we can go after those resources, bring them into the county, build more partnerships in the way that Steve has been doing, and help adapt, help change the climate, make the climate adaptive change in the area of resiliency too. It's a new area for us. We learn well. And we will do our work to figure out how to do that. It's a different space, has a different sort of return revenue structures to it than clean energy. We have to understand that and build our understanding of that, but we believe that what we've done today proves that we can get there. So we're very grateful for the county to think of us in a broader sense, and we're ready to take on that challenge. As to the board size, it has been an 11-member board, a very active board. We've got 5 committees. They serve on 2 levels of committees. It's a lot to ask. We are a financial intermediary, so we have to have a lot of oversight, a lot of governance, a lot of credit, and we ask a lot of our boards to participate. They are advisors to us in many ways, and so increasing our size to 11, from 11 to 15, will allow for a few board members maybe not to have to provide as much level of effort into our work while giving us the level of advisory. So I think it gives us a chance to balance the workload of our board. But as a financial intermediary, we need that level of investment of our board in our work.
Mr. Edwards, do you have any comments you want to add?
Nothing in particular. I was here last week talking about our flood management plan that we're working on. So we're going to get into this in a big way in the future, and we just feel like the Green Bank is a potential partner in getting that kind of work done. When we looked at the Resilience Authority legislation from the state, there are jurisdictions setting up resilience authorities. We have not seen any particular benefit to doing that, considering we already have an organization that's chartered by the county, has a board of directors, many of the requirements to be a resilience authority. So we just think this is a more effective way to go at this time. If there comes a point where creating an official resilience authority becomes important, say to get funding from the state, we can certainly go down that path.
Thank you. Yes, and I agree that it makes sense to do it this way. It's much more effective than to create a different entity, and I'm in favor of that. The issue of metrics, it's easy to point to your successes for the clean energy projects, and you've had a lot of successes, and it's been a great model, but that's going to be different for the resiliency projects. And so I think as this moves forward and the Green Bank takes on those projects, I think metrics is going to be an important discussion as we move forward.
Very good.
Actually,
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to hold this, but since Councilmember Balcom raised this, and we can get into this as we go through the amendments, but the racial equity and social justice impact statement did raise the issue of tracking, particularly the work that you're doing. And the report did suggest an amendment. I'm not sure if we need an amendment to this document, but at the appropriate time, I'd like to talk to you all about how you see this work moving forward. I know equity, as we've talked about, is a piece of the work you're doing, but how can we better document that? And as a county, we're moving forward and really working in equity emphasis areas. And how do we do all of that work and actually document it so we can show it in the future?
I'll add, and Mr. Deo could elaborate a little bit more, but last year when we spoke about the large expansion of funding for the Green Bank, we made sure that in that legislation that there was emphasis on equity emphasis areas. And what is it, 20%? 20%.
Yeah.
So 20% of the funding, and I think if you want to give us an update just about that, because I think you're exceeding that.
That's correct. It is 20% of our energy tax proceeds used in equity emphasis areas. For this fiscal year, we have exceeded that target, which is wonderful. With that translates to an estimated target around $3 million, and we've spent about $5 million to date in there. So we do track that, and we're also not letting up on the target just because we've exceeded it for this fiscal year. And the way that our portfolio planning works, we have to think into the next fiscal year as well anyway. So we continue with our pipeline, thinking about how we deploy more in equity emphasis areas.
Thank you.
As to equity, we also track a number of low, moderate income households, whether they're in equity emphasis areas or not, recognizing that those households exist elsewhere in the county as well. So we do very much pay attention to metrics will matter.
Yeah, and I think one of the points in the racial equity and social justice impact statement was if there are ways not to just track the income levels of households, but to also just so that we can continue to track on the racial equity impacts, race and ethnicity.
Very good. Any objections to the amendment going from 11 to 15 board members? Nope. Very good.
The next proposed amendment is actually a staff proposed amendment. It's a technical amendment simply to correct the numbering in sections 18. So it's actually at page 4 of the staff memo. It's a technical correction of the numbering.
I noted that. Thank you for your eagle eye
And
correction. So without objection there.
the last point is not actually a proposed amendment, but something staff wanted to bring to the committee's attention for special consideration. It was not captured, it's not part of the executive's bill, but I do thank Mr. Edwards actually for flagging this issue because it's an important one. In Bill 4421, in adopting Bill 4421, Council had specifically provided for the appropriation of 10% of the revenue received by the county from the fuel energy tax each year to be designated towards operations of the Green Bank. Now, with the Green Bank potentially expanding its scope, the question for the committee's consideration is, did you want in any way to limit that appropriation to simply the energy, do you want, if you take no action and make no amendment, then it goes to the Green Bank and they can apply to all their activities. However, remembering that at the time that appropriation was made, the Green Bank had a narrower scope, which we're expanding. So I guess the question is, do you want to leave it open? Do you want to restrict it to energy efficiency?
So, really important point, and I actually thought that debate was settled last year with that legislation where the council made the decision that the investments made using the energy tax revenue was going to be only for renewable. We weren't going to be using any fossil fuels for that work, for those funds. And so if I understand the point that you're making, this expansion would not limit any of the additional funds that the Green Bank would receive from any source.
I think it's slightly different that, Councilman Glass, if there's no change, this funding could be, the energy tax funding could be used for resilience activities. It wouldn't change what they do on energy efficiency and renewable energy. Those restrictions would still be in place. It's just that the energy tax funding can now be used for a flood control project, for example.
Got it.
So the question is, do you want to restrict it to only energy activities since the source is the energy tax?
So I think it's a bigger issue than that in terms of, and this discussion happened long before I got here. The issue of making sure that by adding resilience projects, that we don't ever get to the point where we're not still focusing on clean energy projects. And so I think there has to be some limitation there to ensure that 10 years from now, we just don't have a resiliency entity. So I don't know how we make sure that that happens, whether that's something that we monitor and that we ask that there's a clear delineation when we look at the projects, that clean energy projects continue to have a focus. So I think it's bigger than the 10% of the fuel energy tax and where that goes. So I'm okay with kind of looking at, let's see what happens and then implement restrictions, or while the bill is open, do we make those restrictions now?
So thankful for the thoughtful comment. My concern is that we start playing a shell game, in that as we've expanded the scope and start bringing in more revenue for more work from various sources, that the core mission gets diluted. And my preference would be for the energy tax that was the legislation using 10% of the energy tax for clean energy remain intact. To me, that should be in a lockbox, because that's specifically what the legislation was for. And with the expanded scope, whatever expanded revenue or opportunity, however you want to define that, that can have a broader scope, broader mission.
Yeah. I have a question regarding that. Since this is in a new area, looking at the resiliency work, and we're hoping that there will be funds out there that you can go towards in other projects, does it tie your hands not to have all of the resources available? I guess what I'm saying is, as you're going for things, sometimes we have to show, oh, we're putting in X amount or we're doing this. And I don't disagree with Chair Glass, but my concern, since this is all new work, would it be better to say, enable you all to go explore, figure this out for a year or two, which I think is Councilmember Balcom is saying, and then come back and report to us, and if we need to put the lockbox in place, we do. That's a question. Like, do you feel like that's a concern for you all as you're entering into this work?
I think that's an issue of restricted funds.
Yeah.
If these funds are labeled restricted, does that impede your ability to get grant funding if you have restricted funds?
So, I mean, the Green Bank may have thoughts on this. I think, so we're going to be looking for all sources of funding to do resiliency work, some of which the county could then convey to the Green Bank to help do the leveraging that they've done on energy efficiency. My feeling is that when the bill was passed last year, the energy tax bill was passed last year, that there was no thought about this because the only thing the Green Bank could do was energy efficiency. But I think the general thought of the people involved in that discussion was, this is great. This really help us meet our greenhouse gas reduction goals by energy efficiency and renewable energy. And to Chair Glass's point, I think to say, okay, now you can use it on other things, to me, it does take the focus a little bit off on what their expertise is right now And they will have to build the expertise on the resilience side, and I'm confident they can. They've demonstrated that ability to do that, so I'm confident of that. But I don't know that we, even as a county, are ready to jump into big resilience projects right now because we're still doing the background work to understand where our risks are and things like that. So I think advocates who supported the energy tax proposal would like to see that sort of restriction remain for energy tax issues. And I think we'll have lots of opportunities in the future to get funding from lots of different sources, from the county, federal government, from state government, to do resilience activities. That's my personal opinion.
I agree with how you just framed it, right? And if we take a step back, we see that the Green Bank was first allocated some funds, and you used those funds well. So well, in fact, that the council decided to allocate 10% of the energy tax and use that money directly for energy efficiency programs. And while that's less than a year old, right, that program, we now want to expand the scope even further. And I don't think that we should diminish that 10%. And because it's fairly recent legislation, I would prefer to have it as restricted funds, as you used, and allow future funds to be used in a more liberal way.
So we would need an amendment?
Correct. Now, I should mention, the reason an amendment wasn't proposed here is that actually it's a separate chapter of the law. It's chapter 52. So we may actually need, it's the fuel energy tax law, which was not under the scope of this bill. So we would actually probably need a separate bill for that.
Well, I think the T&E committee will jointly sponsor a bill to restrict and allow the uses of all these different funds.
If I could ask a question about that, I just wonder if something couldn't be put in the chapter related to the Green Bank that said any revenues from the county through the fuel energy tax given to the Green Bank can only be used for energy efficiency, renewable energy projects as specified under sections, whatever the appropriate sections are. It does seem to me it could go in this.
I agree.
But that's a legal question.
I agree, and I think it's a good idea, but because the energy, so we can draft an amendment to say when they do receive funds, this is what they should use it for. But I think we'll have to have a separately sponsored bill that specifically addresses Chapter 52, where the energy tax is created and accounted for, just because it was not part of the notice on this bill. But I agree with the idea of saying something on this particular bill, which we can, since we understand the gist of what the committee is saying, we can put something in here too.
Mr. Dale.
Just one caveat, if I would. We need to prepare for this work of the resiliency work, and it may not be on the capital side, it would be more on the administrative side, right? So the budget, the administrative uses might be used for consultants or others to help us learn about the resiliency, and so that wouldn't be necessarily within a clean energy, but so looking at it more from an administrative use of funds versus the capital use. But we want to prepare ourselves for that other funding source. So just to bring that up.
Well, and so we'll be diving deep into the budget in a few weeks' time. But if you can, because you just brought it up, and I think it's an important point. Yeah. So of the Green Bank's total budget, what percent does the 10% energy tax make up of that budget?
Of our administrative budget?
Yeah, I mean, you were referring to administrative costs, sure.
So it's about 10% of it.
So then the 90% is flexible to do these consultants, right?
No, 15% is was the amount we associated with how much of the energy tax would be used for administrative. Okay. We're below that is what I mean for this year, but the 15% was sort of our cap on that. So there's room within that to do the work of the resiliency.
I just want to clarify your question, Council.
Sure.
Glass. You were asking of the total budget of the Green Bank, how much does the energy tax make?
Correct. Okay, so what, Mr. Dale, you were saying 10% of the 10% is being used on administration.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm talking about so what is the Green Bank budget right now, total?
$4 million.
Okay, so $4 million. How much of that is from the energy tax?
So it varies because we're not getting the energy tax on a regular basis.
Fair point.
It'll amount to 40 to 50% of that.
Okay. So about half of the budget is unrestricted in the terms that we're using here, so that you could use that for non-clean energy needs.
Well,
or administrative needs?
Sorry, just to clarify, so
We're muddling this, but
yeah, there's administrative budget associated with the first capitalization that came from the Pepco Exelon merger.
Yeah.
It's a 15% of a total over a time frame. So we've actually progressed towards that 15%, and I forget exactly where we are, but that would run out relatively quickly if we're not using the rest, the energy tax admin portion, to fund any of the other administrative activities that we're doing. So there are repayments coming in from the repayments of loans and other things like that, but it's not a substantial amount of funding that over the long term would not be enough to maintain the admin of this type of activity on its own.
I think it's safe to say, correct me if I'm wrong, that all the funding, or most of the funding the Greenback has gotten this far has some restrictions. So it came from the Pepco Exelon merger, it came from the gas merger, it came from the county's energy tax. So none of it can be used for other activities as the Greenbank wishes. It all has kind of a nexus around energy efficiency, and so we would have to find additions in order to get the Greenbank sort of up and running on resilience. They would have to collectively, we would have to find some funding to do that kind of work. And I think we can. I think we can go after grant funding to say we want to do research on how to develop projects in resiliency and how to incorporate our Greenbank in those activities. And so that can be a joint effort we can work on. But I don't think there's funding now with the Greenbank to do this kind of work because, again, it all has this kind of restriction nexus.
Because this is my concern, is what I'm hearing is we have to get up to speed on this. We have to learn how to do this. And while there may be funding out there, I'm just saying, I don't know if that funding is going to go to you all getting up to speed on this. So I have concerns about restricting these funds while we're trying to, build the capacity internally for this. Hearing what these funds were supposed to go for. So I think this is.
You want to comment or you want me to?
Yeah, I think the caveat that you were mentioning, depending on what this amendment looks like, if the restriction is for clean energy projects, there may not be enough admin to even write a grant to get the funding. So it may be too restrictive for them to move into resiliency work, unless we, from an operating perspective.
So let me ask Mr. Edwards, and I hear perfectly what you're saying, and I understand it. But Mr. Edwards, when this, and Mr. Dea, when this legislation was proposed, it was to expand the scope of work that the Greenbank is doing. Do you believe that there is funding out there to help support this expansion, or do you need to use existing revenue, or whatever the budget in 2 weeks' time will show, additional revenue to jumpstart this expanded work?
I think when we proposed this legislation, what we wanted to do was lay the foundation for the Greenbank to be able to get into resiliency work. And the first part of that foundation was remove the restriction that all they work on was energy efficiency and renewable energy. So this is sort of the base layer. We're building the foundation. They don't have staff capacity to do that now. We in the county don't have the staff to do a lot of this work yet. We're just building into this. So we are going to be seeking new positions to do grant work. We're going to be going after grants. I believe there is funding out there, and I believe we can partner with the Greenbank and not require a whole lot of their time to begin with to develop that next layer, which is start to get funding in to do these things, to understand how Greenbanks can get involved in resiliency work. There are Greenbanks, the Rhode Island, Rhode Island Resiliency Finance Authority does energy efficiency and resilience.
So let me take a step back again. The legislation last year allocating 10% of the energy tax and devoting that to the Greenbank so that they could continue doing green energy work, right? But that was because that was the only work that the Greenbank did. Now, with the proposed expansion of the Greenbank into resiliency, does the executive think that the unrestricted nature, or all these funds should be unrestricted because of the new expanded scope of the Greenbank?
I think the executive would want to restrict this funding to the energy activities as sort of originally envisioned under the, even though it was the only thing that could be done at that time, I think that would be his desire to keep it restricted.
I agree with that, because this was only done 1 year ago. And I have concerns about expanding the mission of the Green Bank at the expense of the work that is being done and that we recently dedicated funds to. Mr. Deo, do you think that there are there, or Mr. Morrell, are there opportunities to receive funds to do some of the legwork for the resiliency? How do you jumpstart resiliency work? That's, I guess, the question here.
So we do generate revenue, and then when it comes to us, it's unrestricted. So we would tap that in order to build our resiliency from a learning and build, not really small amount, maybe we might find for capital uses, but probably use that to sort of support our work in the resiliency area, which might mean we're tapping a little bit more of the energy tax to cover other bases of our administrative work. But that we can work within that balance, right?
Mr. Morrell?
Just to add, so I think that you can think of the capital requirements as multi-tiered, one being what Tom was just describing and getting things kicked off the ground, but the catalytic capital really come from federal and state sources that we would want to work with the county to apply for, whether those be grants, whether those come to the county, and then the Green Bank is designated as the resilience entity, not an official authority as the state legislation, but that will receive the funds. And then the real substantial sum of money would come from the capital markets and from the private leverage that we could get to accompany those funds. So I don't think that there's a risk of all of the Green Bank activities just becoming a climate, a resilience activity, because we would need to draw in these other sources for resilience activities.
I mean, and that makes sense to me, which is why I had asked the question a few minutes ago about the total budget and what percentage of the budget the 10% was, because then we could extrapolate that most, not all, but most of the other remaining funds can be used in this unrestricted way. Okay.
One other way I think the Green Bank could start to get into resiliency, if they're going to expand the board, a couple of board members could have backgrounds in resiliency. And that's, I mean, there is a lot of firepower in the board we have right now. I mean, they are so valuable to the Green Bank. And in the same way, new board members who have expertise in resiliency could be people that really bring a lot of knowledge and connections to get resiliency funding and background. So that's one way to get that base.
I'm good.
So it's,
Yeah, I'm good. Can I go back to something though?
is it on this like proposed
No,
amendment
it
or
was something
other?
else that I just thought of.
So let's just put
conversation.
so let's just put this one to bed. So I think we're good through this good conversation, making sure that the energy tax is restricted funding, and that we'll work through and get updates on the progress of the resiliency aspect.
Okay, thank you.
And if that requires additional legislation, the committee would be up for that.
Thank you.
Great. I'm sorry, I want to just go back because this conversation made me think about it. When we made the change that said the board must meet with the executive and the president of the council at least annually, that's the change we made. Given the conversation we had here and changing it from the council to the president of the council, should we also add the chair of Transportation and Environment Committee? Because that's not always going to be the same person as it is now. And I'm thinking of the in-depth conversation we just had here on this committee, and if we're going to move away from the full council meeting with the Green Bank, should it be executive, president of council, and chair of T&E?
I appreciate the question. I would actually, so I understand executive and president, right? The leaders of the two branches of government. I think it would be more effective to meet with the T&E committee.
Yeah, well, or committee, yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Do we want to amend this and say instead of the president of the council, the T&E committee?
Yeah. Oh, no.
Or is that a subcommittee?
So the only caveat I'll add there is committee names and structures do change. So if we're going to write this into the bill, we may want to say something along the lines of the committee charged with,
Yeah. That's fine with me. Yeah.
Let's do that.
Thank you. I'm sorry to backtrack, but this conversation just made me think we wanted to expand that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yep, so committee of jurisdiction, or however that needs to be wordsmithed. Thank you. I think we're done on this item.
Yeah, I just want to, on to the funding, as we move forward and we move into budget, I'm excited by the resiliency work. We just need to make sure that you have the resources to kickstart, jumpstart, move forward, both from the Green Bank and DEP. So thank you.
Thank you.
Agreed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work. We're excited about this and more work to do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Oconee.
Thank you.
And then the last item of the morning, item number 3, 2022 National Pollution Discharge Elimination Systems Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System Permit Financial Assurance Plan. It's a mouthful. We'll wait for Mr. Levchenko to return. Oh, just changing out his slide deck. I see what was going on.
So yeah, your third item today is the financial assurance plan that the executive has transmitted to the council. This is related to the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System Permit, or NPDES MS4 permit, that the state requires that Phase 1 jurisdictions, which includes Montgomery County, have to submit a financial assurance plan every 2 years that basically shows that they will meet the permit requirements over the permit period. They show the projects to be done, the costs for the projects, and the revenues that the county expects to generate in order to cover those project costs. And the assurance plan itself is, the template is designed by the state, and the county has to work within that template. I thought it would be helpful briefly for DEP to walk you through that report, hit the major points about what it says about our compliance with meeting the requirements of the permit, and then see if you have any questions regarding that. I will say we did get one piece of testimony at the public hearing that was, I would say, tangential to the financial assurance plan. It had to do with concerns about stream restoration projects, and the testimony argued for upland retrofit projects instead of stream restoration work. And this is something the council has talked about, or the prior council talked about a bit. I think that is a good subject for another meeting, and not directly on point with the financial assurance plan today. But it is something that we can talk about in more detail. We do have DEP staff that can speak to that today if you want to go into it. But I would suggest we focus on the assurance plan itself. With that, why don't I turn it over to DEP? We have some slides we can go through pretty quickly. And I'll flip the slides for you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Amy Stevens. I'm with the Department of Environmental Protection, Watershed Restoration Division. So I'm going to try to move through this quickly. Keith's packet has a lot of the same information, so I don't need to necessarily repeat what's there. So you go ahead and move forward. Go ahead and move forward to the next one. So really what we want to do is set the stage, talk about what the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System Permit is, otherwise known as MS4, and then get into the FAP. So MS4, NPDES, these are terms set by the Clean Water Act. This is essentially allows us to discharge from our storm drain system into the streams. Without the MS4 permit, we would be in violation of the Clean Water Act. This is issued to the county as a whole. We get it every 5 years, if that's what the term is, and it's issued to us from the state because they have delegation from the EPA. Next slide. So we got our latest permit, most recent one, on November 4th, 2021.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
MS4 permits are complicated.
Very good.
Siri agrees.
I have never had that have it on silent mode too. I'm so sorry about that. I'll put my arm down. Anyway, so the MS4 prohibits pollutions being discharged into our waters, and we do a lot of work through the permit in order to prohibit that. Primarily, it's through our restoration work, impervious surface restoration, but we also have total maximum daily loads, which are essentially pollution diets that limit the amount of certain types of pollutants in our streams. And then there's lots of other provisions. Next slide. So these are all the elements of the permit. I don't need to read through them all necessarily. We certainly can come back and talk about our permit. We just released our latest report, annual report, that talks about all the work that we did in FY22. Next slide. So the financial assurance plan is a requirement of the Maryland statute. We have to do it every 2 years. We have to follow MDE's format. All phase 1 MS4 jurisdictions have to do this work. So that is 10 counties in the state of Maryland. And it's meant to show that we have the funding needed to meet our impervious surface restoration in the MS4 permit. So this is our fourth FAP that we're submitting to you today. We have to have it approved by county council. That's required by the statute. It has to be certified by the CE or CAO, and then it gets posted on our website as well as MDE's website. So we have the draft FAP for you here today. We have to meet, I should have mentioned earlier, we have to meet 1,814 impervious acres is our restoration goal in the permit. So that's what we're trying to achieve. Okay, next slide. We'll get into the FAP. There are 5 tables. Table 1 is basically all the future work. With the details that's in that table is all the future work we're going to be doing. Future being FY23, current, which is actually this year, through FY26, which is the end of the permit term. That table also has a summary, if you can go to the next slide, at the end, that talks about all the work we've done, which brings in completed work. So you see both future and completed work. Operational is things like street sweeping and storm drain vacuuming. Capital is all our capital projects, including DOT's work that they do to support the permit. And then the other is things like Tree Montgomery, Rainscape, street trees, all those other kind of work. Oh, and I'm sorry, I meant to talk about these blank cells. If you looked at the beginning of it, you're probably thinking, what's going on here? There could be work that could be continued from our previous permit. The county does not have any, so this is not applicable to us, so it remains blank. Thank you. So this is the one I was just talking about. I apologize. This is the one that talks about the what we are doing in our future versus and as well as the total term. Essentially, we are going to meet our permit. That's what this is saying. By FY26, we will actually have more, but that's just an estimate, and we want to make sure we have room in order to be able to ensure we meet our impervious surface restoration. And this is the work, both actual expenditures, which is FY19 through FY22, plus our appropriated approved expenditures through 26. Okay, next slide. These are our costs for this work, impervious surface restoration work. Again, it's just kind of the same information, but in different details. They want to see it based on operational costs as well as capital costs. And it provides both the work that the actual costs we did between FY19 and 22, and then our approved as well as our projected costs. Okay, next slide. Table 3 is, again, redundant format. This table is essentially pulls from Table 2. It's essentially supposed to say we have 100% of the revenue necessary to meet our impervious surface restoration goal. And that's what this table is telling you. And Table 4 is, now this one flips a little bit. This is actually for the entire permit, the way they structured this table. And this one is to show all of the funding sources we have, both our PAYGO, cash, water quality protection charge, bag tax, tree canopy, and to name them, and then our capital, debt funded, so our bonds and loans, and then our grants, state and federal grants. And then Table 5 is all of the specific completed actions we've done to date. We met our 2010 permit at the end of 2018, so we can then move right into working on this permit, although it wasn't issued to us yet. So this work goes from 19 through 22 is what we've completed. and then 23 through 26 is what we have to do. So this shows you all the work. Again, it's the same kind of work, operational, street sweeping, storm drain vacuuming. You can go to the next slide, please, Keith. Capital, you see we've completed 52 BMPs. That's not just projects, that's actual BMPs in the ground. And then, of course, other is our rainscapes, BMPs, as well as street trees and Tree Montgomery. And that is our actual cost from FY19 through FY22, plus the amount of impervious surface we've already completed, which is 59% of our goal, which is great. And that was a really fast fact. And now if you have any questions.
Great, thank you. I just have one quick question and I'll turn it over to Councilmember Balcom. So over the last number of years, talking about MS4 permits, mostly in the context of stream maintenance, right? That's how it's been approached to me, but just want to make sure that through this presentation, it's a lot more than that.
It is a lot more than that. We do a lot of green infrastructure, stormwater pond retrofits, rainscapes, Tree Montgomery, a lot of trees planted. Yeah, it's a lot more than stream restoration.
Yeah, I would add that in addition to streams, which is, as you stated, has been the focus, we've been out there getting additional funds from Chesapeake Bay Trust, EPA earmarks. All that money is going to trees and green infrastructure. So we're very cognizant of the concerns raised by Mr. Bauer, and we're addressing them through our implementation.
Balcom.
Couple things. So just to clarify, when you say that the table 3 of confirming that the revenue is in place, that's assuming that we included in the budget, right? So that nuance, everyone's aware of that nuance, right? I just wanted to confirm that. Okay. And then from the private sector, mitigation or remediation that happens in private property, do we get to claim that, or do we get to?
No.
So this is just what the county does?
What the county does, that's correct, yeah. No, mitigation work is because it's for another purpose. We don't take credit for that. Stewardship work, which is a clarification, we can take credit for, and we did take credit for some stewardship work that was done when the ICC was built, but we cannot take credit for mitigation.
Okay, thank you.
They can take credit for work if they are providing resources to other entities, like grants to nonprofits.
That's true. That's
that are
correct.
doing that can show up here.
That's correct. We do that
Yeah.
through our Clean Water Montgomery grants.
I had a question to follow up on that. The Rainscapes program, where does that fall in this? From what you were,
We take credit
Credit for
for
that.
all of those. That's
Yeah.
correct. So
but those are on private property.
those are on private property through our rebates. Yeah. So that's right. But it's again not mitigation work. That's actually installation.
Installation. Okay.
But like an installation, so a new construction project, if they put in their parking lot is pervious, can you take credit for that?
No, because the permit is assuming that any new development then gets new stormwater management. So what we're doing is treating uncontrolled impervious surface. So the assumption is any development is treated, and that therefore we don't need to do restoration work. Now, if a portion of it isn't treated, then we would have to go back and put in controls, but we have to do inspection and maintenance of that work, and that's an important part of the amount of controlled impervious surface in the county, but we don't get credit towards our goal.
Okay.
Our work is in addition to other permit requirements. So if there's a permit and they have to plant trees or install bioretention facilities, we get no credit for that.
A good primer. Many more conversations to come, and especially the budgetary context in which Councilmember Balcom alluded to. So I'm good with this. We all are. Oh, you're good. Okay. I didn't know if that was last minute comment. No. So,
All right, that's it for today.
very good. Thank you, everybody. Good committee session. separately, I want to share with you. I'm texting an executive.
Reject.
All council members,
Yeah.
and you're all in agreement. So just so you
Oh,
know.
no, yeah.
And if they want to change, then they hurry up and reject.
Yeah, we did it last Tuesday.
Yeah,
Just so you know.
and they knew who we were interviewing.
Right, it's like,
So my sense is because so Mitra, they have no problem with.
right.
Hedrick, because it was a split. They extrapolated a little too much from that.
Oh, they definitely did, because there were some people who
I mean,
did a show.
aware.